Yeah, you need
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Dave Leeson. I'm an old guy. I'm a professor at Stanford, and used to run a company that I founded in Silicon Valley 50 years ago.
Which is Silicon Valley's down over
Right
there.
over the edge of the hill. Yeah, we're up at our house on at the end of Soda Springs Road in Santa Cruz Mountains.
And this is where Mount Umunhum is?
Mount Umunhum is, well, you can't see it for the tree, but it's right behind that tree.
It's a square
It's on
box?
the same ridge, yeah, same big concrete box.
And you can see this from all over Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
this box. So this is your house.
Yep.
You live at the box.
We live at the box.
But you have a lot of radio antennas here.
Absolutely.
What are these things?
The ones over there are ham radio antennas.
All right. Tell me about them.
Well, those are what are called Yagi antennas. Those are all my design because it's windy up here. So years ago, we used to lose one every winter, and my wife, Barbara, said, you're an engineer, why don't you figure out how to make these so they won't fall apart? And I said, well, nobody makes them for our kind of winds, so we ended up doing it ourselves, and I ended up writing a book about how to do it. But those are different amateur radio frequency bands, and depending on the time of day or night or the season, we can talk anywhere in the world from here.
That's awesome.
And
you bought this property because of the radio
we
footprint?
bought the property because it had the view we wanted for radio. Yeah, and then it ended up with a nice view also.
Yeah, you're on the top of the hill.
Yep.
You can see in all directions.
Yep. So it's not
awesome.
blocked in any direction.
Now, what is this tower behind you?
This one here, that's a commercial tower. That outfit has antennas for various purposes: truck lines, school buses, government agencies, and they provide radio contact for situations where they don't want to use cell phones. And this is one of three that we have that is a business we run. One of them is an internet tower, and the other one has the fire cameras on it and other government agencies and the like.
Very cool. This is a unique hilltop because it's what, 49
Yeah, it's 49.9 miles from the San Francisco post office. So these towers serve all the way from San Francisco to Monterey.
Very cool. So because these towers can be seen in all directions, right? Which is a unique hilltop.
Yep.
How long did it take you to find this property?
A couple of years. Barbara was looking at topo maps and calling real estate agents who assured us that, oh, this is exactly what you want. No, it wasn't. And finally, this is actually, I think, the first place we heard about from a fellow radio amateur who was the fire marshal of the county who had radio equipment up here. And he said, well, why don't you go see my friend Bernie? I think he wants to sell his property. And next thing we know, we owned it. So,
for people who don't know how radio works, what's going on in the tower that causes a radio wave, and what is a radio wave?
Well, a radio wave is it's an analog of a light wave. They're exactly similar but different wavelengths. Radio waves have wavelengths measured in meters or centimeters. Light waves are measured in millionths of a meter or angstroms.
So if a radio wave hit you, could it see you?
Radio wave would bounce off something that was big enough compared to its wavelength. So for something small like me, well, it would need to be optical wavelengths. But radio waves are used for radar. These are used more for communications, these towers. And on each of the towers you see a number of antennas, the structures that are on the side of the tower. And they send out radio waves from their transmitters, and they receive radio waves to their receivers. And generally what's here is what you would call a repeater, where it receives a signal from, say, a handheld transmitter in a truck or a bus or whatever, needing to check in with a dispatcher. And the person at the other end will press the button on the side of their little radio, little walkie-talkie. It'll send a signal up here from its antenna. It's received here, it's translated to a slightly different wavelength and then sent back to everybody so that the dispatcher can hear all the trucks and all the other trucks can hear each other. So in that way it's different from cells in that on a cell phone, except for unusual circumstances, it's more one-to-one. We don't have cell towers up here because cell service from here would serve so many people that you couldn't accommodate them all. And so this has a 130-mile horizon in all directions.
Wow.
And a cell tower needs to be located such that it doesn't have that kind of horizon.
Yeah,
Otherwise
it's a little hexagon, right?
hexagon,
Like
right.
2 miles away from the cell tower.
Yeah,
or
actually
something.
now they're a little sector of the hexagon, yeah, pie slice. And that way they can serve as many cell phones are in that that section. Anyway, interesting business, and the types of users here range from government agencies, your typical FBI walkie-talkie, and truck lines. A lot of services like that. School buses where they don't want the driver to have a cell phone, they want them to have a radio in the bus.
Yeah.
And these folks had a lot of trouble during the pandemic, of course, because schools were closed, so their business dropped off, and they pleaded with us to accommodate them, which we had to do in order to, keep things going. But things have recovered, and generally, it's an interesting thing to be in. I've always been interested in radio. I got interested when I was a 4-year-old kid. Visiting a 14-year-old genius who had a ham station, and got me excited. And so I've never worked a day in my life.
I put a wire across my dad's roof to try to get shortwave,
Yeah.
so, but I never took it to this length.
Yeah, well,
Built a
fun.
company about it.
Yeah, we use these towers for our own amateur antennas also. On this one behind me,
Yeah.
there are wire antennas that are our antennas for amateur use, and they allow us to. I'm not sure they allow us or we allow them to use the other part of it, but we have a cooperative arrangement where we use those for the antennas that we need to have up that high.
Yeah.
This tower behind me is 140 feet.
Yeah, it's pretty.
And when you get up top, the view is even better.
I bet. You go up there?
Oh yeah, Barb bought me a climbing harness that's the kind of harness that you lower somebody out of a helicopter in. It's painful to put on, but you can't fall out.
Does it shake up there?
No, actually, it's very stable.
It is.
I was on the tower, I think, at one point when we had an earthquake, but I barely noticed it.
Wow.
But Barb yelled at me, "Come down! We're having an earthquake." She didn't want the tower to fall with me on it.
No, that wouldn't be a fun day.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing me your backyard a little bit with us.
Yeah. No, I thought you'd enjoy it.
Yeah. And what do you teach at Stanford?
Microwave engineering.
Okay. And what kind of things would I learn in your class?
How to design circuits and devices and do experiments with wavelengths that are what are called microwaves, which are waves that are generally 10 centimeters or shorter. And the microwaves are unique in that the structures are the same size as the wavelengths, whereas circuits like in a computer, the wavelengths involved are much longer than the circuits. So things in the lower frequency, higher wavelength regime seem to happen instantaneously, but microwaves are unique in that the mechanical and the electrical phenomena are both important.
And your students go and create all
They
sorts
go
of
into-
devices all over the world?
They either go into teaching, or they go into research, or I've had
Or working at Apple or Google or something like that?
Yeah. And it's fun to think about all the students I've had that every once in a while I'll run across them, and they've made a success out of that, or maybe they decided to do something else, but it benefits them.
Radios are starting to change because they're in these little devices we are holding, these phones.
Those are all integrated circuits now, and the evolution of radio has been from circuits where you wire up stuff to circuits that went on a circuit board to circuits that are integrated and are just like the integrated circuits that make up a computer. And that's been a big breakthrough. Outfits like Qualcomm have led the way in that.
Yeah.
And Apple's done a lot of work in that.
When you get an array of radios, because let's say I have 11 devices that have little radios in my house, right? Phone, tablet, laptop,
Yeah.
and even your AirPods headphone case has a little radio in it now, right? What does that let you do as an engineer when you have so many little radios?
Well, the little radios are interesting because, first of all, they rely on the fact that they can send signals so fast that most of the time they're waiting. And they're patient. But if it's for speech, it has to update often enough so it sounds okay. And if it's for data, it can be a little more patient. If it's for video, it doesn't look good unless it's updated very fast. But the radios share the time and the frequency bands in a way that they can all operate at once. Very unusual for anybody to, get a slowdown because they have so many devices. A cell phone has 4 or 5 radios in it.
Wow.
And, it's got a Wi-Fi, it's got a cell phone, it's got typically a Bluetooth.
In Apple, they have ultra wideband, which they haven't even really explained yet. And coming out of CES next year, there's a YR standard coming out, which is like a better ultra wideband.
Yep. Plus, they have the ability to payment radios. That's a different system. And but all that has turned out to be something that, if you needed enough of them, and of course there's billions, then you could afford the amount of engineering that went into figuring out how to get them onto a little circuit and make it so you could afford it.
Yeah.
And one of the projects I worked on years ago was the development of the first specification by the IEEE for Wi-Fi. It was a committee called 802.11, and we wanted it to be perfect, and we never could, and we kind of gave up on the idea that we failed because it isn't perfect. Well, we never thought about the fact that for 50 cents it didn't have to be so good, and for a dime it was even less significant. And so now Wi-Fi is everywhere. So I'm one of the success has 1,000 fathers, failure has is an orphan. Well, I'm one of the 1,000 fathers of Wi-Fi. So the 10,000, who knows? Anyhow, it was a lot of fun to be active in that.
Very cool. Radio's changing.
Radio's changing. There was a time when radio was considered to have been played out. That the only.
And if you look at a tower like this, you're like, how many towers does the world need like this, right?
Well, there's probably hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And of course, satellites all connect by radio.
Yeah.
So anybody who has a satellite dish, that's really the equivalent of a radio tower, but it points up. And some satellites are synchronous, so the antenna is fixed, and others are set up so they can accommodate a moving satellite, like GPS.
And now Elon has Starlink over our head, which has, a grid of 100 different satellites flying around over our head?
Yeah, that's a long time idea that was tried before, but it wasn't economical then. Now it is. Yeah. Motorola tried it and kind of gave up on it.
Yeah.
But
well, he reuses rockets so he can put things up cheaper than NASA used to be able to. Right?
Yeah, you never know what a good idea is going to come from, but the amount of radio energy is now so much that you could probably succeed in most urban situations in getting energy out of it to charge a battery or something like that. People are thinking about that now.
You told me that Silicon Valley used to be called Microwave Valley.
It was a microwave. I don't remember if it was Microwave Valley or Microwave what, but there was a time when the companies that formed this area, first of all, pre-World War II, there were a lot of companies here that were in the vacuum tube business, and their specialty was avoiding getting crushed by RCA, who had all the patents, and they succeeded. And ended up, for example, ITEL McCullough, IMAC, made 2 or 3 million tubes for radars during World War II. And they designed
all in Palo Alto, or close to Palo Alto.
They had made them put a plant in Salt Lake City so it wouldn't be so close to the coast. But they had one here too, yes, in San Carlos. They started in the butcher shop and made a success of it. But after the war, Stanford's efforts on microwaves under Fred Terman and Bill Hansen led to people getting a degree and then starting their own company making microwave tubes. And in the 50s, this was the source of half the microwave tubes in the world.
And when did you move here?
I moved here, well, let's see. I first moved here to San Francisco in 1944, but I was just a little kid. Moved to LA, came back to this area in 1959, been here ever since.
And you started a company?
The company started in 68.
Okay.
And I ran it for 25 years and then kissed goodbye all of 2,000 employees and said, okay, that was hard, but I was happy doing it, but now I'm happy doing something else. And Stanford called up and said, hey, did you ever think about teaching? And I said, yeah, I did. When I was first getting my PhD, I asked about it, and I was told no because I was already working in industry. I would be no good as a professor. I was already spoiled. So, but luckily I came. They said if you win a Nobel Prize, you can come back.
There we go.
But so I got back anyhow. It's fun. I enjoyed it. It's a different world.
It is. MC Hammer and I taught a class at Stanford, and we both looked at each other and go, they never invite us here the front doorway, would they?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, no, Stanford's a unique place. It learned over the years how valuable it was to share know-how with industry, where the culture is quite different, and there's really a complementary. The thing about Stanford that's unique is that it was interested in problems that other universities thought were too industrial, and therefore people got experience that they might not have got somewhere else. I went to Caltech and to MIT and to Stanford, and each one was unique. And as it happened, Stanford fit me very well. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your radio towers with us and a few of these Silicon Valley old time stories.
Yeah, I knew the guy Don Hoffler, whose article named Silicon Valley. He had written articles about the work in this area prior to that, and he came across that name from some friend of his, and he thought it sounded great, and so he's gotten credit for it. And all the people who actually thought up the name now are grumpy about the fact that no, we thought of it and nobody knows our name, but that's how it happens.
I have a lot of stories like that. I was sitting next to Tim O'Reilly when he named Web 2.
Exactly.
Well, thanks. What a beautiful day, and what a beautiful property.
We love it. Yeah, we have 80 acres up here.
All on the top of the hill?
All on top of the hill.
And how many different because there's radio antennas I haven't even shown the viewers.
Oh, how many antennas are here?
Yeah, you have another group of antennas on the other side.
Probably 200.
200 antennas up here. And I guess you're walking proof that RF doesn't really hurt humans, right?
Listen, I've been exposed to it since I was a kid. There was a time when in the company we had a room full of things that were all being burned in, operating at once, maybe 1,000 different radios going at once. And we worried about that. And if you went in that room, you're going to get your eyeballs fried or something like that. And no, the energy level is so low compared to a microwave oven.
Yeah.
That, as far as I know, I'm just as vacant as I was then. So.
How old are you?
I'm 85.
You've lasted, so the rest of us have a chance with our little iPhones.
Oh yeah, no. Barb and I say, look, we're the same age as old people, but we're still kids.
Well, thank you so much.
You bet.